the very first thing I want to talk to you about, Jesse, is you're a criminal court judge in Harris County. What are we doing right now to make sure that the criminal courts and jury trials and things like that are going forward? Because, and the reason I ask that is because I've talked to some judges in civil court, and for people that aren't familiar with the difference, the criminal court trials get precedence under the Seventh Amendment generally. Like that we can delay some of these civil cases and things won't be that bad. But for the criminal cases, Jesse, we kind of got to figure out a way to move forward regardless of the situation we're in. So what are you and some of the other criminal court judges that you know, what are y'all doing to make sure the wheels of justice keep moving forward?
I mean, one of the things we do is we've encouraged early on, and I'm sure this happened in civil as well. You encourage the parties, like, look, just because we're not having trials, like basically we're operating under the assumption that eventually we're going to have trials in person.
Yeah.
And there's things that need to be done before we go to trial. And, the parties need to make sure that, all the discovery is completed so we can just, when we hit the green light and turn it on, it's ready to go. And so, but it is a difficult situation. Obviously, you're talking about people's liberty. I was a prosecutor for a really long time before I was a judge. And, if you have a very serious, it sounds weird to say very serious murder case, so I'll just say murder case.
Yeah.
In the state, if the state wants the defendant to serve 30 years in prison, I mean, that's a really long time. And for a defendant, you might have a defendant who's like, no, I want my day in court. I want my trial. Obviously, if there's a murder case, usually one of the undisputed facts is that somebody's dead. So that person's family and friends want their day in court as well. And so what we've really been encouraging is, we may not be going to trial right now, but you need to be ready to go to trial when we're ready to go to trial. And so we don't have any more unnecessary delays. Because again, the first trials that are going to be going in front of juries are going to be very serious and unfortunately pretty old criminal trials. And we need to be ready to go for everybody's sake.
So I was reading on Facebook the other day, and I don't know if you know Judge Donna Ross. She's a civil court judge in Harris County. I've actually tried a case in front of her. She's a very, very good judge. I think she was a practicing lawyer for 30-something years. Like you and I, practicing lawyers, you were a practicing lawyer before you became a judge. So Judge Roth, you, me, we really appreciate how important it is, both in the criminal and civil context, to actually at least have the threat of a jury trial. And I was actually seeing where Judge Roth, it looks like, started a jury trial. She put this on her Facebook page, and they were in NRG, and they had social distancing and all these sorts of safety measures. I think the case settled before they actually went to trial. But right now in Harris County, are there any criminal trials going on?
Not that are going on right now. I mean, you can, the issue, I think the biggest issue right now is, well, there are several issues, but one of the concerns from the defense bar, and rightly so, is if we're doing social distancing, it's hard to whisper in your client's ear, from 6 feet away.
Yeah.
Another issue that the defense bar raised, and again, as somebody, you've picked juries, I've picked juries. When you have 65, a typical jury panel might have 65 people on it. You start doing the math with keeping them 6 feet apart. Next thing you know, juror number 65 might be 30 yards away from you.
Yeah, you're talking about like a football field or something.
Yeah.
Huge. Yeah.
And so you're asking questions. When people are closer together, obviously the more people are in your field of view. So you might be talking to juror number 4 about a criminal law issue, and maybe juror number 21 makes a face. Well, if they're close to each other, you can kind of see that out of the corner of your eye.
Yeah.
Well, if you're doing that with everyone 6 feet apart, you might not see juror 21. If juror 21 makes a really bad face about, if a defense attorney's saying, hey, can you guys understand why we have the right to remain silent when talking to the police? If juror 21 doesn't believe that, maybe that's not the kind of thing they're going to say, but they make a face and you miss that. I mean, you might not want that person on your jury as a criminal defense lawyer. And so that's a concern as well. So, we're really trying hard to find a way to have a fair trial for everyone. Obviously, the number one person who the trial needs to be fair for is the defendant.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge right now. And so we're still working through those issues. And, I hope eventually, I'd love to try a case. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I want to be a criminal court judge, but
sure.
Right now we're just having a hard time doing that. I mean,
well, and this whole thing is fascinating to me because there's all sorts of different industries, businesses where you can make a lot of changes. You can move things around. Restaurants can go all online, as restaurants can have all their stuff outdoors. I mean, there's just all sorts of businesses where there's a lot of different things that you can modify. But you and I both know we got something called the Seventh Amendment, and your right to a trial by jury is enshrined in the United States Constitution. It's also enshrined in the Texas Constitution. And so, there's no way around that I know of, other than like maybe in the civil case, if you were agree to try the case to the bench instead of having a jury, maybe you could do that. Maybe you could do an arbitration, but we got to have jury trials. And so I'm really, really curious, particularly now with a lot of the protest, a lot of the violent stuff that's going on, where we really need a functioning criminal justice system. Are y'all prioritizing, maybe, like you said, the more serious cases, the murder cases, the violent cases, stuff like that, over some of the other cases that maybe, misdemeanors or cases where there's not as much violence? Is there any sort of kind of prioritization going on?
Well, I mean, I think so. One of the issues, the cases, in a way, there's sort of two issues going on here. So I'm a district court judge, so basically I only handle felonies. There's limited cases that are misdemeanors that can be my court, but 99.9% of our cases are felonies. We are district court judge.
Yeah.
The cases, in a way, prioritize themselves because the nature of the laws around punishment. So, for instance, there's certain cases where only a jury, after a guilty verdict, can give somebody probation. So those kind of prioritize themselves because, the defendant's going to say, hey, look, I'm not going to sign up to go to prison, or I'm not guilty, but in the case I am found guilty, I'm not signing up. I want a shot at probation. And so those cases prioritize themselves because those are the cases that are hardest to settle. And so, there's not a formal, you have the same rights as somebody who got busted for the third DWI as somebody who got busted for capital murder. I mean, those rights transfer regardless of the charge.
Yeah.
But we're obviously, the cases that need the most attention get the most attention. But the cases where, and that's one of the things that's enshrined in some of our local orders that we've voted on as a body is, hey, if you don't need judicial intervention, we don't want you coming to the courthouse. We don't want you to get sick. So we're being very selective about when somebody has to appear in person. So they're kind of prioritizing themselves. But I mean, obviously our number one priority is we don't want to make the pandemic any worse than it already is. Yeah. And we also protect the rights of the criminal defendants who appear in our court and, want their day in court and have a presumption of innocence. And we definitely want to protect their rights.
So one of the things that's on my mind, Jesse, is like, for instance, the really serious, the murder, the violent cases, the cases in which we may need to lock somebody up. And so we can't have a bunch of people that are accused of murder necessarily walking around on the street. How does it work? Like, let's say somebody is charged with murder, and is the hearing to determine whether they're going to be out on the streets or whether they're going to be locked up, is that a judge-made decision, or do you have to bring a jury in for that too?
No, so those are bail determinations are all judge-based. And there are several, I have several people charged with murder who are on bond, and they, they're on bond, and they're, they might have certain conditions of their bond, but we have several people charged with very serious offenses on bond. So
yeah,
it's just a case by case determination, but those are all judge issues, not jury issues.
But for the people that are worried about whether our streets and communities are safe, right now at least, there is a mechanism by which our judges in Harris County can determine whether somebody should be incarcerated pending trial or not. In other words,
oh, sure.
Yeah, we don't have to wait for juries for that. So for people that are worried about a bunch of criminals running loose on the streets, it sounds to me like it's kind of the same way, but pre and post pandemic. The judges make the determination, and the coronavirus hasn't really affected that too much. Is that right?
No, we're obviously mindful of, the rules are the same regardless of pandemic, no pandemic. The
Yeah.
rules are the same. Um, obviously everyone's innocent until proven guilty. And like I said, I mean, there are people who are charged with very serious offenses on bond, and that that was the case 10 years ago, and
Yeah,
that's
that would
the
be the
case
case
today.
regardless. I'm glad that our criminal justice system, at least that piece of it, is still functioning pretty much as normal.